Thank you very much for that introduction and for the invitation to be here. Our time this afternoon is very brief, I'm told. But when the dust settles on election night, 2014, New Zealand First will be in a strong position, which makes the policies we stand for extremely relevant. You will see all the other permutations from all the critics and commentariat, but some things in politics, like in business, are to do with mathematics and numbers. Our manifesto is being updated, so in the brief time available, let's focus on three issues. First, New Zealand First has been proved right on the issue of the exchange rate. We have been consistently warning for decades that New Zealand's monetary policy is in a time warp. Some of you recall back in '84, the Douglas regime with Longy coming to government and then passing changes to the way we ran our banking system in terms of the central bank, and setting a inflation rate of 0 to 2% as being the #1 crude criteria. And no one has ever explained why it was 0 to 2, and still no one has bothered to ask in most quarters, but that's what they did. But we have said since that time and even today that this is not in New Zealand's interest. In the last 2 years, we've introduced 2 bills on the Reserve Bank Act, which were narrowly defeated by one vote both times. Right now, the underlying economic reality is disguised and is hidden because of the best terms of trade for 40 years. But even now, we have a huge balance of payments deficit. That deficit was $7.5 billion in the year ended December 2014 by their predictions. Despite all the hype and spin about a rock star economy, we are not paying our way. New Zealand has an endemic balance of payments deficit, and that is why New Zealand owes the rest of the world a net $150 billion, or around 66% of GDP, which puts us right alongside Portugal and Spain. If you think it's a rock star economy, then I think your preference is for a one-hit sort of Billy Ray Cyrus show, and that's the end of it. A chronically overvalued exchange rate is eroding the economic base. All sorts of manufacturing firms and capabilities are being lost. And I know that is not going to be an attractive message to Wellingtonians, except if you care to think for a second, this city is losing out to either Auckland or offshore. And unless there's a change, it will go on. The International Monetary Fund's recent report concluded that New Zealand's dollar is seriously overvalued. It is doing great damage to the economy, but the commodity boom is concealing temporarily the real extent of what is happening. We're ending up with a very unbalanced and vulnerable economy. We have a situation where one product, one company and one market is completely dominant. Milk powder, Fonterra, China. Now look closer and you will see the damage from our overvalued exchange rate. The other week, an award-winning super yacht exporter in Auckland, and we are, after all, possibly the best yachting nation in the world. With limited resources, we've proven it over and over again. But a leading yacht exporter in Auckland, Alloy Yachts, was forced to lay off 70 workers because of the strong New Zealand dollar. You might say only 70 workers, but it adds up. Today, 85 workers are likely to lose their jobs at Christchurch Yarns, which the company blames again on the high New Zealand dollar. This story is typical and is being repeated up and down New Zealand. Fitzroy Yachts in New Plymouth, a leading industry in that part of the world, is closing with a loss of 120 jobs. What do they blame? The overvalued dollar. Week after week, year after year, the story of these closures for that reason continues unabated. And if we don't know that this is an export-dependent economy, then we know nothing about the economics of running New Zealand. Many economies do not have our level of dependence. The United States and countless other economies, from whence so much of the blind ideology we've adopted comes from, don't have our dependence. But we have, ever since 1882 and our first frozen shipment of meat, been dependent on an export economy, and the thesis of the party I lead is that if you're dependent on an export-dependent economy, then your monetary policy should reflect it, not act against it. Now, New Zealand First is committed to a realistic exchange rate policy that will stop this remorseless undermining of the economic base. We have consistently and urgently sounded the alarm on foreign ownership and of other assets. Now we are approaching an election, and as is entirely predictable, all of a sudden, other parties are jumping on the bandwagon. They are welcome to, but they should at least acknowledge who raised the alarm first and who has been consistent about it. And if you're voting on this issue, you should perhaps decide upon which background and record you can place some reliance. For some of these parties have a track record hitherto, up till now, of having dismissed such concerns as alarming and xenophobic. The facts are these. There are large-scale purchases of land, especially dairy farms, by foreign interests. The 16 crayfire farms sold to China is the tip of the iceberg. Why is it happening? Because as part of our monetary policy, we don't mind what comes, where and when, and we call it all overseas investment, whether in fact it remotely resembles that or not. Second, a significant proportion of our housing stock has been bought by foreigners, and that is continuing under the national regime. Many of our best businesses and firms are being sold into foreign ownership, such as waste management, which is something like muck we all have to deal with. And where there's muck, there's money. So what happens? Well, we up and sold it to a Chinese company recently. Something that no matter what reforms and things we do, we're always going to have waste. So we decided to make it somebody else's profit base. Now, while they've been in office, National have shown their clear intention to allow as much of our land, property and businesses to be sold into foreign ownership as overseas interests desire. They have shown absolutely no will to stop or slow down losses to foreign ownership. So, voters do have a clear choice in September. Under National's present policy settings, losses to foreign ownership can only get worse. Now, what we're offering, New Zealand First is offering, is a robust policy to protect New Zealand's national interests and to halt these losses, because most so-called foreign investment is bogus. Nothing new is created, either in employment or exports. It's just a case of ownership of existing assets changing hands. And how could that possibly advance the economy if the dividend yield from that change ends up in some other foreign economy and not ours? When the current neoliberal policies began in 1984, and I can recall this Rotary Club heaving a sigh of relief, thinking Nirvana had arrived, it's going to be fantastic, and it was. We had such a great party, it was unbelievable. Downtown, people who barely got out of school were running the stock market, drinking Dom Perignon like it's going out of fashion. Get up and leave $200 as a tip on the table, and we thought that we were a rock star economy. I remember very well. I was a member of the National Party back then. Some of you recall that. We were the pariahs. We'd go downtown and they'd treat us like we were lepers. But some of us at least had the presence of mind to say, yeah, we'll see how long this new South Pacific bubble will last. And last it did not. Anyway, back then, at the start of July, August, September 1984, the change of the regime and the Labour Party's in power, and Mr. Douglas is your darling at the time. I remember that very well. Back then, 90% of this country's stock market was foreign owned. 19%. What is it today? 70%. One doesn't have to be a rocket scientist to understand how this transfer of ownership acts as a vacuum of wealth out of our economy. What is it about us that suggests that we know better than Singapore, Taiwan, Japan, China, just 4 examples? Or for that matter, if you are green inclined, and there are 4 economies which are light years ahead of the Green Party in the world, and they're all in Scandinavia, which part of this do they think is a smart idea? Those Asian countries or those Scandinavian countries? Now the third concern is specifically about the housing situation, in particular because National has made such a total hash of it. I was once a proud member of the National Party when a man called Holyoake stole a Labour Party idea called social housing and the State Advances Corporation and gave it a new name. He called it Building a Property Owning Democracy. And at that time we lived through a vision where we housed more people than any other economy anywhere in the world. And all of a sudden, now, since 1984 and presently, this is all too hard for us. A country that grows trees faster than any other nation on earth. And I say the National Party's made a total hash of it. House prices in Auckland have been rising around 14% on an annual basis. Where I live, it's just staggering. You may as well not get up and work during the day, because if you just sit there, the house price is going through the roof in St Mary's Bay and Ponsonby and all those parts of the country which used to be occupied by Samoans and poor people just 30 years ago. But it's all happening, up by 14% on an annual basis in Auckland alone. The Real Estate Institute of New Zealand data shows that the median price of a house in Auckland is now $563,000 and heading towards $600,000. This is bubble territory. And my question is, has the Prime Minister never heard of the basics of supply and demand? But of course, I know I'm in front of the Rotary Club. And Merrill Lynch is a big name in the perception of the people I'm talking to here today. Excepting if you know anything about Merrill Lynch, you wouldn't have that view. Because Merrill Lynch and firms like that took the Western financial system to the brink of utter collapse. And then to get out of it, called it a global financial crisis, and they're back doing it all over again. Surely you understand how Merrill Lynch and companies like that bashed up hundreds of thousands of mortgages that were never intended to be paid. It was never their concern. They batched them up and called them subprime. Bit like how the National Party explains these days about housing having a weather tightness issue, whatever that means. They were rotten homes that were built, and they're rotten homes now. Subprime was never subprime. It was a fraud on the market, and they packaged these 100,000 homes at a time, mortgages at a time, and flogged them off who to? The American pension industry. And those people will never ever see their money again. But back to my point. Has the Prime Minister never heard of the basics of supply and demand? Faced by a housing crisis, the government is refusing to act on curbing demand by limiting the purchase of our housing stock by non-resident, non-New Zealand citizens. I mean, what could be wrong with that? The idea that the housing objectives of this country is to house our own is surely not radical. Mr. Key has spent the past 5 years claiming that foreign buyers make no difference. No problem. There is nothing to see here. Just move on. He has the audacity to say that because New Zealand First wants to restrict foreign ownership, New Zealand First does not want New Zealanders to trade with other countries. Where did he extrapolate that from? That because you're against non-New Zealand residents and non-New Zealanders getting New Zealand housing, you're against foreign trade. Absolute nincompoop comment. Here's the point. It's a silly attempt to divert attention from the real issues. This is worse than just a head in the sand attitude. It is woeful, willful, and a deliberate denial of facts. Over the weekend, it emerged that whilst the Prime Minister has been dissembling on this issue, on the other hand, over in the other corner, at another part of Cabinet, Finance Minister English had asked Treasury last year to check the facts. Mr. English, and thanks to Go to TV3, was personally briefed, it comes out, in July last year by Treasury on restricting overseas buyers, and was advised by Treasury that it was feasible. If you saw The Nation over the weekend, you saw him getting caught out because he had overlooked that they had a briefing that he had ordered from Treasury at the time. Now, National has learnt nothing and is determined to persist with this folly. On the weekends, the nation building has said this. This is what he said, and I quote him. "The question is whether, in the long run, it's desirable that we ban anyone from outside New Zealand from being able to buy things in New Zealand. We don't believe that's desirable." And then to quote him further, quotes, "Yes, no, well, you know, it will show that there are 2 or 3 houses in every 100 being bought by Chinese residents, so what do you do about that?" And our answer would be, that's not a big problem. End of quotes. Now, this answer was typically evasive and dismissive. It suggests there is no problem. Now, the real question becomes, how does he know how many houses are being bought by non-New Zealanders? He does not. But as Minister of Finance, it's worse. He doesn't want to know and prefers a dipped-in South Island guess. Remember, we have called for a register for foreign ownership of land and houses. Other countries have it. Australia has it. National is opposed to it. In short, they don't want the evidence to out their flimsy position. All the facts we can see, reports from real estate agents, properties being widely advertised in China and elsewhere, point to a major problem. And if Barfoot and Thompson, Auckland's top 24 agents, comprise the top 20 being all Asians, I don't think they're selling to New Zealanders. I think it might be a harbinger of things that are happening and things to come. In short, there is a problem, and in September voters will get a clear choice, because our policy is that we will stop non-resident, non-New Zealanders from buying our houses and land, except if there are first stringent criteria met related to our export and economic interest and health. That's what other countries do. Even China does that. Even Japan does that. We'll introduce a register of foreign ownership covering land and housing. We want to know intelligently what's going on. And these are hardly radical steps. Mr. Key may think it's silly, but then his judgment would say that about China, Hong Kong, Canada, Australia, Brazil, Japan, Singapore, and most other countries in the world, including most of the Pacific Islands. Limited housing lands and land stock should first and foremost be available to a country's citizens, New Zealanders in our case. Be warned, in the next few months, National's polls will panic them on this issue. Mr. Key will then make a dog whistle about his concern over foreign ownership. He'll say we do not want to be serfs in our own land. Why do I say that? Because that's what he said last election. You recall? And it was a dog whistle that most of you heard and wagged your tail and obeyed. By his previous comments, though, a dog whistle is all it will be. Now, I know I only had 15 minutes, and I'm trying to stick inside the time frame I've got. In September, you are going to have a real choice. You'll hear issues in this campaign with great clarity as the deck is being cleared from all these minor parties, the Kim.coms and the Horne Fest, where a German buys out a culture called Maori, where they try to prop up the United Party, the ACT Party, and a guy that thinks that chemical trails from aeroplanes are an attack on the citizenry of New Zealand and the rest of the world. That's your choice. But where we are concerned in New Zealand First, we'll be making it very clear that people have a choice and that they can sign up or they can carry on with the present regime and all that it does not mean in terms of a bright economic and social future. You'll have a real choice come September, and I'm asking you to exercise it in the country's interests. Thank you very much. Well, it's this amazing thing about politics. I can recall an election night where the media were all dancing around saying, well, you guys are stuffed, you're lost. And I'm thinking, why don't these guys get an abacus board? Can't they add up? Right? And I'm seeing it now, and that is being debunked as we speak in the last week or two. But there's been for a long time the imagery of the contest between National and Labour and the Greens. And I'm making it very clear from my perspective and my experience that there's no chance that the Greens and Labour can form a government. That's as clear as daylight. They haven't got the numbers, and they will not get the numbers if that is if that is what they put up as an alternative. So I'm not wanting to get caught in an answer which my media friends ask me every darn day, every time I go across the bridge to Parliament. For 21 years, our position on these issues has been this. We have an election so the public can decide. Second thing is we have a campaign so that parties can announce new policies or explain their policies, most of which none of us have heard, including me. The third thing is a recent survey said that New Zealanders overwhelmingly, including 35% of the National Party vote, do not like these sordid pre-election deals. And the last thing is, if you want to be a practical man or woman, I don't know how to play cards when I've never seen them. I'm not clairvoyant, but I can say this, this is a repeat of what I said last week, there's not going to be a Labour-Green government. Well, the first thing we're going to do is demolish the attack on superannuation affordability being mounted by New Zealand Financial Services Council, headed by one Jenny Shipley. Now, you recall Jenny Shipley. It's 1997. I'm a strong believer in compulsory savings, and I offer a referendum where I give you an 8% tax cut, painlessly, and you put that straight into your saving account in your name, a la Singapore, Chile, and other countries. And she went out and opposed it as being, opposed me, and saw it as a chance to demolish Bulger's chance of staying as Prime Minister on the basis that this was an attack on New Zealanders' rights and freedoms. Today, that same person is heading a Financial Services Council demanding that there be compulsory savings and that they take control of our superannuation for the very unselfish reason is that they'll be able to do it better and be taking a commission on the way through. If you believe that, you belong to the Mother Teresa Society. You do. They oppose, all these people, Nielsen, who's the CEO, and Shipley oppose compulsory savings. And all of a sudden now, they've got you all believing that we can't afford it. Really? Well, Germany might be 8.2 of GDP, but we're only 4.1 net of GDP. So where is the present crisis? It doesn't exist. And I've seen the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research putting out a paper the other day. They haven't got one shred of evidence to say that our problem is what we have abroad. Our problem has been primarily this. We've run mass immigration in historical terms into this country for the last 22 years. Now, how could our population be ageing when we've run such high immigration? Because targeted focused immigration would have brought in mainly younger people, but we didn't. We brought in all Tom, Dick and Harry, the whole 100 yards. And if I come out of China, I can bring 4 parents with me. Just one man with a wife can bring 4 under family unification, and we've now got 68,000 in that category. So my simple answer to you, and I can have it argued much longer, look at the facts. Where is the crisis? Excepting, I think there's something self-serving and egregious here, and that is certain financial services markets wanted to take control of it. They've already got control of KiwiSaver, and on their present regime, they're going to take $22 billion from the KiwiSavers over the next 30 years. Is that sound? Well, Lee Kuan Yew didn't think so, and nor do I. Not that I'm in his league, of course, but I'm a great admirer of his. Yes, sir. Well, first of all, you're right. Ferries, trains, buses, and taxi discounts as well are all part of that card. But look, there was a local body election last year. How many of the people with that card went down to the local body election and said, we want a fair deal like Aucklanders are getting? How many confronted the local councillors and demanded that they give you a fair deal? Because I don't recall anybody saying that in the whole campaign. Now, sure, I can do it, but not now. I'm not the Minister for, I was the Social Minister for Senior Citizens. But the current Minister's not doing it and should be doing it. I confronted the Dunedin and Invercargill councils recently asking, why are you not giving these people down here a fair go? Because the money, the thing has been subsidised, and what you're trying to do is sell a car to them that should be free. Now, I got your complaint, we'll work on it, but you've got to help as well. There's 600,000 plus people with that card. That's the most powerful voting voice in New Zealand. But they've got to do is, not in your case of course, they've got to get out of their home and go to the meetings and drum up some democratic response. And then you'll find you get a fairer deal like in Auckland. Well, the first question is, I know of no agreement we have which restricts our sovereignty or our Parliament's right to set the monetary settings for New Zealand. That's it. And on the TPP, well, great respect, sir, how could I possibly know whether we're going to support the TPP or not when, unlike other parliaments and other representatives, I'm not even entitled to see any of it? It could be the best thing since sliced bread. Well, if that's the case, what I'm arguing for is, will you write into it the right for a review every 5 years? Because if it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, you'll have no problem with that, will you? Or are you writing into this deal that it will not be capable of public disclosure as to the negotiations until 3 years after you've signed it? If it's so good, why would you be doing that? Now, the point is, I don't know enough about the TPP, even as a former foreign minister of this country, because we have not been privy to the details, and until we see it, we're going to demand at least 4 fundamental conditions before the signing of it. Now, I know a lot of people here are globalists, and they think the whole world is about a free market in exchange of ideas and exports and policies, although as though it was something new, for God's sake, in the 1890s the world was far freer than it is today. And I just noticed by chance that there are countries, for example, like the United States, who when the issue becomes their national interest or ours, they pretty soon revert to type. Our job as a country, as small as we are, is to ensure we look after our people first. And if you've got the quality products, which we have got, we should be able to, with the right economic and monetary settings, do much better than we are doing. The reality, you will know, is that for many, many decades, and twice in our history, we were number 1 or 2 in the world. And all the things that are put up as handicaps and impediments today all existed back then, only more so. Isolation, distance from markets. None of that is true. If you've got the quality product, you'll get rid of it. Thank you.
John, would you like to say thank you?